Jason, welcome to Automate All the Things. We're so excited to have you. Welcome.
Thanks a lot. Looking forward to this. This is going to be good.
And we've got Christian. We've got some classics in the chat. Got Colleen, Robert, Daniel. So if it's your first time here, welcome to Automate All the Things. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. Where we talk about no code workflows, try to make you work more efficiently and less hard. There was like a better way of phrasing that, but Jason, really excited to talk to you about n8n. I think a good place to start is maybe quickly an introduction into you and how the hell do we say n8n and what is it?
Yeah. So my name's Jason McFeetors. I am. Oh, let's just face it. I'm just a big nerd. I'm really
You're in good
into.
hands. You're in the right place. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
I think so. I think I found my people here. I've been doing tech. Well, officially for about 30 years, working in the tech industry. Unofficially, I think I really started into tech when my parents found me at 4 years old, having taken apart their alarm clock. Um, so to me, it's all about the different technologies, and I love old tech and new tech, and different ways of looking at technology. I play in all the spaces:
Mm.
hardware, software, development, infrastructure, networking, you name it. If you plug it in, I probably play with it.
Well, actually, it's weird because we're going to talk about something that you kind of don't plug in. So, clearly you're a man. I don't know if men like you've essentially touched everything, but specifically today we're going to be talking about n8n, which
Yeah.
I think for me is also this. We talk a lot about automation here. It's a channel called
Hmm.
Automate All the Things, and so we touch Zapier, Integromat, and Kado, or the gamut here. But what's interesting about
Yeah.
n8n is that it's quite different. It's a different approach.
Yes.
So for folks maybe who have no idea what it is, and frankly, I have very little idea of what it is, and that's why I'm excited
Mhm.
for the next hour. Like, what is it?
So n8n it's actually very similar in some respects to a lot of these other tools that you mentioned, like Zapier and Integromat, or Make as they're referring to themselves these days. Um, and really, the idea is taking an input of some sort. An event occurs,
Mm.
and using the information that that provides to do other things, fire other events, do connecting other systems together, modifying the information, transforming it so that it all works with all these other systems. So again, very similar to a lot of these other things, but it does do some stuff a little bit differently.
Mm.
So first of all, the one thing that really catches most people's eye is that they are very free with their source code. You
Okay.
can literally go on GitHub and grab their source code and do all kinds of fun stuff like create customized nodes, which is the finite unit of n8n. Or you can, if there's something that you wish they changed and did differently, you can do it. You can, if you've got a coder buddy who is good in like TypeScript or JavaScript, they can go in and modify all that. And so then the other nice thing about having access to that code is you aren't reliant on somebody else hosting this for you.
Mm.
You can do it on you go into whatever your cloud provider of choice is and install it in there. You can install it on a old PC at home. They've even have a desktop version that you can just download and you run the installer and it'll load up for you. I run several instances on Raspberry Pi, and I just happen to have a cluster of 10 Raspberry Pi sitting right here that I run it on.
Right. Okay. So when you said you've touched all things, you really meant you're running this I guess software and you're self-hosting it on a Raspberry Pi. So we're not going to get there in the next 45 minutes. But I think for folks
Nope.
wondering if we've got the right person here, we've definitely got Jason and in Jason a professional on n8n and all things. But I guess I do want to spend a little time talking about this because I think most people, and let me know in the chat if this is the case, are like, I use Integromat, right? Like
Mhm.
that's, or I mean, I use, insert automation tool that's, cloud hosted and I don't have to worry about it. You mentioned one thing, which is the value of like self-hosting and being able to
Yeah.
see the source code. Now, in what kind of outcomes, like what is the difference that being able to see the code or being able to self-host, kind of brings from a user's perspective. So what are, I guess said differently, what are the use cases for you where you would say, oh, you should look into n8n?
Sure. So one of the challenges that some of these systems have, where it's being hosted by the provider
Mm-hmm.
somewhere on the planet, is data.
Mm,
When you're working with data, there's often restrictions around it, and we don't see that a whole lot here in North America. But in the EU and in Europe, there's a lot of things around data residency and where the data can go, and how you can use it. So, for example, with some of these other products, if I need to do something with my data and I need to send it over to this automation tool, um, it could be going, I'll just call it out, it could be going to Russia, for example, for all
mm,
we know, and we don't have that control over it. Uh, Whereas with n8n, they do have a cloud offering, and in fact, we'll be showing some stuff in the cloud
mm-hmm.
offering today. And that's based out of Berlin, and so that's where that data is going. But let's say I've got a large database. Let's say I have a nice big SQL server that's been chugging away for 8 years, and
Mm,
we've got all kinds of data in there, and it's behind my firewall.
right.
Now we find ourselves in a situation where there's a lot of complexity to get access to that data.
Mm,
We have to talk to the security team, and they're going to go, "What do you mean you want to open up holes in the firewall?" No, we can't do that. N8n, you can install it on a like I said, a Raspberry Pi, on whatever server you want. You can install it as a VM, and it can be inside your network, sitting right beside your database, and connect into it and be able to process it. And it just hums along. You don't have to
right.
worry about where, is the data going out somewhere? Is somebody getting access to it? You've got complete control over it.
Amazing. So I just wanted, it seems like we've got a bunch of folks in the chat. Ahmed, welcome. Grilled Cheese Dude, classic. Mike, welcome as well. Christian, Robert, specifically Robert is wondering around particular use cases. And hey, Zach, welcome as well. Really excited to have you all. Seems like 88 N8N is a popular. Folks are interested, so I'm excited to jump in. But
Cool.
one thing before we do, and I think this is what we were checking before the stream, is what happens to me often is I'll use an automation tool and be like, oh, it doesn't have this like I'm a niche, I stream, and I have a lot
Mhm.
of like requirements. Like I'd love YouTube thumbnails to be able to be automatically updated in Zapier, but they haven't built out that
Sure.
functionality.
Yep.
Am I understanding it right that the open source would allow me to like influence, at a much greater level, even like put in my own money or my own time or pay someone to be like, hey, thumbnails are important to me. Can you build this integration? And then it becomes available in n8n. Is that one of the values of open source, or not open source, or the ability to contribute to this project?
Yeah. N8N has a really strong community, and they're often, if there's something that you are need or are looking for, you can put a request in, but you aren't limited to waiting for the N8N company to
Right,
actually build out these things for you. Um, if you've got a buddy who's good at TypeScript, um, he can go and build out this integration for you, and you load it on
right,
your own instance of N8N.
right.
Nobody else will have it. You can do with it whatever you want. It becomes proprietary to you, and it just runs. It just easily integrates in.
Perfect.
It's essentially a little function that you would create, and I was playing around with it. I'm not a TypeScript guy. Like most things, I know enough
Mm,
to be dangerous. And so I loaded up the dev environment one evening just to see how hard this would be. And I wrote my first node in about 15 minutes.
mm,
So it's fairly easy, fairly intuitive for somebody, especially if you're
right,
really into TypeScript and JavaScript and that type of thing. Very, very easy to build out. And so you've got that uh, capability
right.
where you don't have to wait for n8n to do something. You can do it yourself. You can find other people to do it. Often, you find the right person online, and they'll just do it for you because they get a kick out of it.
Right. Um, and that, I mean, that's music to my ears. So if the FinSuite folks who are watching, by the way, and who do know TypeScript at the FinSuite team, after the stream, I have some automations I need built out, or some add-ons to n8n I need built out. So I know they're watching. Just know Alex or whoever was going to be helping me. When I say helping is like actually writing the code. I
That's right.
really
Helping
appreciate
by
it.
doing.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so with that, I think we've got a bunch of folks that came over from the Fin Street stream. If you're new here, Automate All Things is a weekly stream where we teach people no code tools and really work more efficiently. Today, we're really excited uh, um, to have Jason talk to us about n8n and Amir. We just talked about that, which is what distinguishes n8n is this open source functionality and this ability to host it yourself. And frankly, it's much cheaper than a lot of tools out there. Even if you take the cloud version, which is what we're going to be showing here. So with that, let's actually jump into my dashboard of n8n. So I guess Jason, take us through this. Like, okay, I'm new here. I've never used n8n, and our use case is going to be I've got this workflow just to show people the overview, right? Which is I've got this Airtable base that I want to pipe into Webflow, right? So when a new candidate comes into my pipeline, I want to update Webflow, and that's pretty much what we want to cover, right? So we're just going to do a very simple automation, and then we're going to show a little bit of that code, like what can you do that's so special about n8n, and then we're going to take a bunch of Q&A. So welcome Josh to the party in the live stream. Totally agree. Let's do this. I just want just a bunch of emojis in the chat for folks who are new here. So let's do it. Cool. So take us through this just the dashboard. What am I looking at
Sure.
here?
So what we've got here is, essentially Aaron has kind of logged in and come to, this is the first screen that you'll really see once you're into the n8n build environment. And this is actually relatively new. This only came out a few months ago. Initially, what you get is just like a blank screen. But this is really nice because you get right here some workflows that have been built out by the community.
Right.
So there are thousands of workflows, and you can just organize them by category. If you're looking to do something with a specific flair, and in fact, if you dig through some of these, you'll probably find some that I've written. Um, and these give you just a really good start point so that you get some ideas as to
Mhm.
what kind of things can I do. And like literally you click on them and they are there for you, ready to go.
Right.
The
We're gonna start with
beauty,
blank. Yeah, I think this is the type. I know folks love to. I think folks here are the let's get in and build. So if I want to, so my understanding is that a workflow is a zap, right? Or a
correct.
scenario. Is that for
Yep.
folks? I'm trying to place people.
Yep.
Not that it's the
It's
same thing.
basically it's basically a link of different graphical items that
Right.
represent some sort of an action, and you go from one to the other, and then you start with some sort of an input and some sort of an output.
Amazing. So let's start there. I think that's like let's dig in here. And
Yep.
okay, this is a look. Okay, so Josh is telling me that everyone came here after the FinSuite Pro meeting. This is a no design zone. We don't design things here. We automate things here. So if you're looking for
Right.
design inspiration, this is the wrong place. But if you are looking for workflow inspiration, this is definitely a place to stay. So,
Yeah,
um,
you definitely don't want design device from a guy in a Hawaiian shirt.
or in a dude with a bear shirt. So yeah, it's we're not the right people. But um, workflow wise, so start right. So
Yep,
what am I looking at? How do I start here? What
absolutely.
yeah.
So what we see here, so this is referred to as the canvas, and this is the n8n visual editor. And what we have here is the very first thing you see when you look at it is this start object.
Mm,
And this is referred to as a node. So this is what a node is essentially. And start is a unique node because you need to have it in every workflow.
hmm.
It doesn't necessarily mean you need to use it, but it needs to be in every workflow. And it essentially has um, no input.
Right.
It just has an output. And so these nodes are how we do different things within n8n. So of course, start node is kind of useless. You
Right.
can't do anything. You can start nothing, right?
Right.
So if you hit the little plus icon on the, so I have that one there. There's the other plus icon there. You'll
Okay, got
bring
it.
up the menu,
Got
and
it.
these are all the different nodes that are pre-built into n8n. It used to be one big long list. The list got so huge they started categorizing them,
Got it.
and this is where you can start looking into all the different nodes that do various different things.
Mm.
And really, I see that there are I classify nodes in different ways.
Hmm.
So there are nodes that are specific to a service. So you'll see lots of them in here. So,
Right. Like
one of them
AWS
is
S3, Airtable. These
right.
are all
There's an
box.
Airtable
Yeah.
node, right? So those are very specific. So you know what you're going to be working with the Airtable node, that it's going to be doing stuff in Airtable. Duh,
Hmm.
makes sense. But then there's other nodes, and we'll see them in here, where like the helpers, for example. If you take a look at the helpers,
Mm.
these are not specific necessarily to a specific service. What they do is they usually do some sort of data transformation or accessing general types of things like an SSH node, for example. It'll do SSH connections, and it's not
Hmm.
specific to a certain SSH server, just SSH in general. HTTP request, one of my favorites. That one, when you're doing API calls or
Right.
connecting into just a generic API,
I
that's
love
when you
this
would use for that.
do nothing. I'm not gonna
Yes.
let's not dig into it. I love the fact that there's a do nothing, I know that there's a lot of so just a note here, I know there's a lot of folks from the FinSuite crowd and and I know that this was always a request, like HTML extract. So extract things from HTML, I'm
Hmm.
sure is a big ask. And if a few agency folks who are trying to migrate from other website and extracting data
Yep.
from HTML pages into CMS collections as HTML
Yep.
extract. So, pro tip, we're not going to
Yep.
dig into that today, but these are
Lots of
the
people loved using combinations of n8n and Puppet.
right. And so these are the I would call these like vertical. So no matter what tool you're horizontal, sorry, no matter what tool you're working
Yes.
with, there's some stuff or markdown converting between markdown and HTML.
Yep.
These helpers. Okay, I understand. And
Yep.
then it sounds like there's this distinction between triggers and then
Yes.
what other things would be called actions.
Yep, that's right. So most of the stuff that you will be working with are generally regular nodes,
Mm,
and so these are nodes that have an input, they have an output, sometimes multiple outputs, sometimes
right.
multiple inputs, and they basically do data transformation and do kind of like decisions and logic and all those types of things. They connect into a service, that type of thing.
Hmm.
Then there's the trigger nodes, which are actually quite interesting because they are, like the start node, for example, is considered a trigger node.
Right.
Um, so the trigger node actually will be listening, for lack of a better term, listening for a certain event to occur. And then when that event occurs, it will then automatically run their workflow
Right.
with the information that's provided to them.
I'm curious, just like taking a moment here. What is okay? So, for instance, you do have a Webflow trigger, right? So webhooks, things like that. You
Hmm.
have Airtable, and I gotta say, when I was digging into this, what I was surprised by is honestly, I would assume that like people contributing are not like building massive amounts of integrations, but I have to say there's quite parity with other tools that I've used, and so that was actually really exciting in that a lot of the tools that I use, and a lot of others, frankly, are already here. And for any kind of like,
Hmm.
oh, it's not doesn't exist, there are actually two options now. One is build it yourself, right, with a helper
Yep.
potentially, or like host it yourself, write the code, find someone to write the code, which I think is that unique aspect of n8n, which is not possible
Yep.
with an Integromat or something like that. So you get parity plus you get like optionality on top, which is really fun. But
Yeah.
let's start with, let's say I want to update when Airtable stuff happens, right? So this is our example of when a new record is created or when something is updated. Let's go
Yeah.
ahead and update our Webflow website. So
Sure. So you've already correctly chosen an Airtable trigger.
mhm,
And so this is kind of inside each node. And maybe just a little bit of explanation around
sure.
what you're seeing on the screen here. So on the left-hand side, there are kind of all the different parameters that are required in order for the node to run properly
Mm,
and execute information. So this is something that is uh, you need to set up all this information so that when it does run, it knows what to do.
right.
And just because they're filled out and all the little triangles with the exclamation points are gone doesn't mean it will work right. It just does mean that it's got enough information that it thinks it knows what to do.
Okay. So let me give it a stab here. I think with Airtable, okay, I like this little docs. So this goes into those little
Yeah.
docs, and that's actually really great. And it's something that I find missing from a lot of automation tools where they don't actually like dig in to each part. So that's fantastic. So let's say I want to check Airtable every minute, right?
Hmm.
And then a base ID is this right here. Pro tip: you can get your base ID from the URL. Table ID is this one right here. So candidates. And trigger field is the last modified time. So it's going to say every minute, go check if there's a new modified time. So mine is called last modified. And this is the name. It's not a field ID, a created time field. So I'm imagining that this is the field name. Or is it the
Yeah.
field ID? Yeah, it seems like the field name. So we're good to go. Did you try to build a new node? No, this is a pre-built node, and we might get into the more geeky stuff a little later with building our own nodes. So not an attachment, additional fields. I think this is good.
Yeah, this is good for a first run.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's fetch. Okay, and this is saying, oh, okay,
So
so it gives me an output in table format. So this is the
yes.
record, right? That was
Yep.
retrieved, or in JSON.
Yeah. I'm
Fantastic.
a JSON kind of guy,
Are you?
not
I'm
because of my
shocked.
name.
Jason, exactly. I was gonna make that joke, but then I guess yeah, you kind of set that one up.
Yeah, it's just right out there. Um, so the reason I like this is because I'm a nerd.
Right.
I'm very logical sequential, and so I start at the top and I work my way down. For a lot of people, they prefer the table mode
Mm,
because you're seeing actual table records.
right.
And the only reason that it when I use the table view is primarily when I don't have sub things
Right.
inside of the JSON where I don't have it nested, and it's just a nice flat because then it
Hmm.
looks like Excel or your spreadsheet of choice.
Yeah. So
And
question
so
question from the
yeah,
chat. So we what we're just trying to do is just an example, very simple use case of just showing what's possible, which is
yeah,
when a new record is created or updated. Frankly, probably updated. Can we go and update or create the equivalent record in Webflow? Just as I thought I'd do a use case that folks are familiar with, just to show the workings of n8n, and then we'll do like some API integrations that are a little more advanced after that. So
yeah,
now this is telling us, okay, this is a record, right? Um, Now I think the next step, actually, I want to throw a quick, maybe a quick, let's say that if we have an item ID, I'm adding some complexity on the fly here,
sure.
right? Let's say if it's an item ID, which is saying, okay, there's the equivalent in Webflow, let's update
Hmm.
it. And if
Yeah,
there's not, let's create that item ID, right? So how about that? That sounds like a
yep,
cool. Okay, so essentially we're saying we might have to change a few things here on the
yeah.
fly, but
So this one here, you'll note
mhm.
if we take a look at the actual information that's in that third column.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's what you call this. You call this nested, and so it's
Yeah.
weird.
Yes. So, when you look at it in like you can look at it from that column or you can look at it from the JSON perspective. You'll notice though that the information and for those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with how JSON works, really all this is it's like a you can think of it like a series of bullets in a document. And that, when you've got the item and then the value and then another
Mhm.
item and another value. And so that's what we're seeing here. And you'll notice that the item part, the part in the left before
Mhm.
colon, matches up with the title
Right, of the
in
field.
your n8n um, table.
Right.
And then the value you'll see is matches one of the records
Mhm.
in that actual table.
Exactly. Okay.
So if we run it again, and I'm not super familiar with how the Airtable trigger works. If you run it again, I think you'll get a different one.
I think we'd have to update, right? So I think we'd have to, because this is the last one we've updated. I don't know if it's going to fetch multiple, but I think fetching one is enough.
There are
And
ways to do that based off how you set up some of your parameters, right?
okay,
So this is good. So we're gathering data here right now.
yeah,
So let's say we've just got this data.
hmm
The question then becomes, what do you want to do with that data? And how do you use that data to, as you were saying, transform it to fit into another system?
right, yeah. So I think here, let's do like this. Like I'm updating an item ID,
Okay,
right? And this is what it's saying. My understanding of this is that every minute it's going to check every record that has been updated since that
correct.
last minute. And so
Yep.
we have
Once
now,
we,
yeah. So for every run, it's checking like, okay, what has changed
yeah,
since the last run?
yeah.
And now we
And so
have
maybe
this one
maybe
right here.
something to mention there. So right now, because we haven't saved this workflow, and we haven't set it to active. So there's a
hmm
couple concepts we can talk about here. It's not going to be doing that checking all the time.
Right, exactly.
All of this is doing is we're kind of in a development mode, and when it does fetch event, it actually reaches out and does it manually.
Right, exactly.
Once we set those two other parameters, this will just kind of hums in the background. You can go have coffee or do whatever,
hmm
and it'll just do what it needs to do on the
Okay.
fly.
So I'm removing this item ID just so we can get one that we're creating, right? So let's fetch that.
Sure.
Now we have that. And now, so our next step is saying, okay, there's no item ID, right? So
Yep.
let's go ahead and let's just do the Webflow part. Let's just say, okay, I
Okay.
just want to, whatever comes here, let's go ahead and do we need to connect the start, or because this is a
No, you
trigger, we're
don't,
good to go?
because you need to have some trigger that's connected to your Webflow,
Right.
because you don't have Airtable, or sorry, because you have the Airtable trigger, you don't need to use the start trigger.
Got it. Okay. So then we want
And my
to,
apologies if people are hearing noise in the background. We got
no,
somebody decided to scrape their yard or something
no,
today.
you're good. You're good. I also believe that the world should stop turning when the automate all the things stream is on, but
Absolutely. I just
unfortunately,
assumed it did.
we're a niche community. Unfortunately, for now. So let's go into Webflow, and then so I'm taking the trigger, and it's just like consume. It's such a developer language. Consume the Webflow API, which can be
Yes.
intimidating, I think, to a lot of people. So I've connected Webflow,
Perfect.
right, and okay, this is actually interesting because it's a I guess a developer built this. They say, what operation do you want?
Yes.
So and it actually weirdly it doesn't use the API language. It uses like human language, which is create, delete, get all,
Yep.
update. So in my case, because it doesn't have an item ID, I'm going to create, right?
So a little insight into that.
Mm,
Um, Often what we're seeing under operations and some of these things that are in the parameters are really based on how the service created the API, because
right,
that's what this is doing. It's talking to the API.
right.
And so it tries to use the language as closely as it can, only because if you're going to be migrating from an API based system into n8n, you'll
hmm
be able to more easily translate that back and forth.
Right. Right. So I think this is one of the big differences, I think, for folks wondering, like, oh, is this something I can use? There is more of like a barrier if you are not, I would say, a little bit technical. And what I mean by that is like,
Yeah.
the word operation might be intimidating to you, or you've never
Yeah.
heard the word post or put or patch or things like that. So
Yeah.
that said, I think again, like every time you get a little more technical, you get a little more flexibility. So you're the trade off between like user experience and simplicity, brings the value of flexibility and power and control as well in this case, especially. So I'm just going to my test website, and then collection. I have candidates, right? So we're gonna turn the live on. Um, yeah, it's true that this is more accessible. Great point, Josh. Of like this makes it more accessible, but I will still argue that like are we creating an item ID? Are we what is get, right? For people who don't
Right.
write code, get is not
Yeah.
something you
That's a
use very often.
very API term, right?
Right, right. And so that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're working as a team or just kind of mindful of like who is going to be working with an NAN. That language might be a little less clear than they're used to. So,
I
um,
do have to admit that
yeah,
having worked with other automation tools and so on, that I early on I did struggle a little
right,
bit,
right. Yeah,
and that's where I encourage people just to like persevere, because it's the reward at the end is worth it.
yeah.
Absolutely worth it.
And I also encourage folks to persevere in, and you've got, if you're interested, you've got 80 more streams on the Automate All the Things channel to persevere through. Okay, so here fields is what do we want to input in the Webflow. So here in
Yep.
my candidates, if I go into settings, I've got email and status, right, which maps to and name. So name, email, status, and that's the information I want to bring into n8n. So field, okay, this actually pulls it in. Actually brings me like, okay, so name. We want to. So how would I pull in from step one? So let's say I want, that record, which I think we pulled in, which I don't remember which one it was. Let's say it's this. I want the name.
Sure. So I didn't see how you created this. So if we could just close this for a second, so just click on the back to canvas. All right, so you're already linked. So this is actually important. You see here that little link that we've got
Mm-hmm.
between the Airtable trigger and the Webflow. That is how the n8n knows where to send your data to next.
Mm,
So this is telling it, okay, whatever we receive as the output from Airtable, send it to the Webflow node and
got it.
process it from there.
Got it.
Okay, and it's so if we can go back into Webflow now, you can do a bunch of different things. So the field value, if you wanted to do static, you can actually just type in,
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah.
gymnasium or whatever name
Yeah.
you want to use. Sorry, that's a really bad joke.
All
Uh,
candidates are named Jim.
right, and then it would write
Right.
gym to every single one. But of course, we don't want to do that. We want that to be dynamic information that was sent to us from the Airtable node.
Mm.
So in order to do that, you click on, so actually, that's a good point. Bring that up. If you have a large thing
Oh,
you want
okay.
to
I
do,
see.
so for example, if I'm automating sending out an email,
Right.
I will use this to build out the template. And then it's much easier to see what you're going to get. So
Mm.
it just gives you a bigger field to work within.
Got it.
But it's the gear that's the important part. So if you click on that, you get two options. One's grayed out, one you can use, and one is add expression. So again, to your point,
Mm.
it's kind of nerdy.
Right. It is. Yeah. And
Like
the expression is nerdy
what do
for
you mean
sure.
by an expression? Well, it's an
Right.
expression editor, and so really an expression is a way to um, basically create variables that you can pull information in.
Got it.
So
And
this is where things start to get kind of nerdy-ish.
okay, so if everyone was like, okay, so far has not been nerdy enough, this is where
This is yeah. Oh yeah. The propeller on your beanie should be going faster now.
um
So you'll notice here on the left-hand side on the
yeah.
variable sector, we've got two different sections. We've got the current node and
Mm,
nodes. And so I want to be very clear how we distinguish with this
right.
because the current node I refer to as it's essentially in context of the workflow.
Okay.
So what do I mean by that? It says basically it's going to be looking for a field, a piece of information,
Hmm.
sent it in JSON, and it's going to be looking for just that piece of information that it received coming in.
Right.
Under the nodes, though, it is not looking for that piece of information. It's actually going to be looking for that piece of information from a specific node that has executed ahead of time. So that means you can still call back to data
Right.
that came out of a node that wasn't directly connected to you,
Right.
but was connected to you through several other nodes.
Got it.
So we're just going to use the current node. It's the easiest one. And essentially what we're seeing here is a breakdown of all the different information.
Got it. Okay, so let me read back to you let me just understand this for folks who maybe that was a little too nerdy for you folks. So essentially what we've done, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jason,
Absolutely.
is we said, okay, we're connecting this to this. So it's going to
Yep.
pass like the output, the JSON,
Yep.
right? So it's passing this right here, right? This thing that we just got
Yep.
as an input into here. And then when I go into here, into the settings, let's reset value and then
Yeah.
let's go add
Actually, yep.
expression. Yeah, there you go.
Yep. That works.
And current node is saying, okay, what have we received in JSON from the
Correct.
previous steps or whatever? Maybe there's an
Yep.
operator, maybe there's
Yep.
an
It
HTTP
may have
request,
done a
whatever.
bunch of different
Things have
things.
happened. Things have
Yeah.
happened, right? And so it's saying, okay, these are the things that happen, and we have an input data as JSON, And this is essentially that JSON that I just showed a moment ago. So I can say, okay, what I want to input into the name is name.
Yeah.
And so it's okay.
You
So
just
this
click it,
is,
and there
yeah.
it is.
Okay. So this is almost like, uh, I guess this is a language. This makes sense. So it's saying go into the JSON that we received,
Yep.
go into the name fields, into the name, to the field name, and then that'll output Aron Kornblit as our first one. But if you're saying like, hey, something happened like 12 nodes ago, I know everyone's forgotten about it. We can also go into past nodes. And actually, I imagine this will be the same outcome. If I go into JSON
It'll
fields,
actually be different, believe it or not.
it
The expression will be different.
oh, the expression will be different, but the outcome will be the
Yeah.
same. Yeah, okay. So it's saying,
Correct.
so it's got its own little language. So okay, go to the
Yep.
node Airtable trigger, take the output JSON, and go get the
Yep.
same variable. Okay. Woo,
Correct.
that was geeky. That was geeky. That was pretty good. That was like a
So
7.5 on the geeky scale right there.
so for those of you who are into JavaScript,
Right.
this actually may look familiar
Right.
because this is actually JavaScript notation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
For
and
those
and
of you
there's
who
a
are
little
the two people that are on the stream who are into JavaScript, um, it
well, for
makes
those
sense.
two, there's a nifty little tip.
Hmm.
You can actually put in JavaScript commands in here as well, and it'll execute them.
Oh, like I can do dot length or something like
Yep,
that. Okay, I've got
absolutely. Yep,
okay
or a count. As long as you put it in the double curly brackets,
in the
it'll
double. Okay,
execute it.
like
Yep, it'll
before
execute it.
something like this, right? Okay, I see
There
what
you
you
go.
mean. Okay, so for folks who this is not going to turn into a stream where we're going to start coding, but check out
No.
Code Meets No Code, where we teach folks how to merge code and no code. It's actually a good example. So, sorry, I'm just going to take a moment here and get a little more geeky. A lot of the challenges that we have running in, Zapier or Integromat is that fact that like dot length. If I want the number of characters of a variable, if Zapier has not coded that as an output, it's inaccessible unless I do a step where it's like write code, take input, right? This is saying, okay, it's a here we will interpret all of the code in JavaScript, or all the JavaScript that you write here. So I can even do, probably something like a little more advanced than this with that. So that
Yep.
just simplifies it. But you have to be somewhat knowledgeable about code. So,
And if you really want to get nerdy,
okay,
there's a function node
right.
that lets you write pure JavaScript.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's Jason. We'll have you back for the pure JavaScript
Yeah.
function. Okay.
That
So
that yeah, we'll call that the advanced lesson.
exactly. So okay, so we've done that for the name.
Mhm.
So I've done that, and it is an expression. So let's do that for the next two that we're pulling in, which is email. So email, go into here, add expression. Um, Current node, input data, JSON, fields, email. There we go. I like that. And then what else do we have here? Status. Now, status is going to be interesting because status from Airtable is itself, an object, right? So let's try to pull. So this is where I don't know how much you use Airtable, but input data, JSON, fields, status. Okay, interesting. So it actually
There you go.
only pulls back the name. This is one of those things where I don't want to get too geeky, and I know we have 10 minutes, so I'll keep this for the end. There's some Q&A, so I'll keep the geekiness for the end. Okay. Now, have I filled out all of the fields? So live will take care of draft. Slug should be auto-created. And then draft, I think this should work. I should
Yeah, I think we should. And if it doesn't, we get an error. And that's not a big deal either.
okay, so we execute.
Yeah. So I guess a couple of things around that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we execute, let me just take a little. Actually, if you want to pop out of
Yeah,
the
go for
node
it.
there for a
Yeah.
second, just go back to canvas. So what you'll see here, and this is kind of those little fine details. You'll see there on the Airtable trigger, there's
Mm-hmm.
this little green check mark.
Yeah.
That means that it's been executed,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually has data associated with it.
Right.
There are you'll see with the Webflow that it has not executed. There's no
Mm.
check mark. So if we execute the Webflow node by itself, it'll actually use the information that's cached in the Airtable trigger
Mm-hmm.
and use that for processing.
Got it. I asked
So
how confident, scale of 1 to 10. How are we? Are we confident this is going to work?
I say that probably a 99% chance it'll work and a 1% chance I screwed it up.
Okay, confident man. Okay, let's execute. Okay,
Oh,
there we go.
got
Collection
like the
not
1%.
found. Okay, and this might be, so I think I know why. It's because, okay, I know why. This is a tricky one. I never published it.
Ah,
And this is what happens when
and that makes sense because you saw in the error, and actually
collection not found.
that's worth looking at the error. I find that you learn more from it, from your mistakes than from things that go right.
Um,
So you'll see right there the message 404. So we all know what a 404 is on the internet. So not found, and this is all just JSON data, and it's pointing saying that it doesn't know where it is. So
mhm.
you're saying not published. Makes
Yeah,
complete sense.
let's try it.
Yeah, try again.
Okay, validation failure.
All right, so that's different. So that's a 400 now.
Field draft is required. That's what I thought. So we gotta
Got to add
do
a draft.
and slug is also, so there's a few fields that are required here. And this
Okay.
is one of those things where actually, this is a perfect example. Josh mentions, like, would you say n8n is the next level of customization from Zapier and Integromat? Just playing with it so far, it's actually yes and no. It's yes in that you get the error log, right? And you can actually go in and look at it, whereas, Zapier might, or Integromat might just be like, here's an error, we don't understand what it is. But you'll notice that the integration, and I'm sure this is the case for a lot of, is not as refined, in that a user using this same tool or action in a Zapier would be like, oh, I'm just not going to use this tool. I don't get it. I'm out. Whereas here, we're assuming that the end user, us, has a little more sophistication, right? So we can go and
And
say, we're missing these fields.
and actually, a good point here, Aaron. How long have you been working with n8n?
45 minutes, but I have to say, I have maybe a few more hours of experience
Probably.
breaking things,
Yeah.
and especially breaking things on the stream. So I again, I just want to make sure folks are cognizant of that, like, additional charge that you put on the user with using something like this. But so far, I found it very user friendly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try
And
to
really,
fix this.
quite often, the services that you're working with are services you're familiar with because they are things that
Absolutely.
they've been in your life for a while. And so I think this is, it's not uncommon for us to kind of see stuff like this.
Slug. So we've got field archived is required. Field draft.
Yep.
Draft. False. And then, do we need the slug, or is the slug auto-generated? Okay, let's give it another go. Let's execute this. Let's
Run
see
it
if
and
that
see if we get
works.
another error.
Okay, that seems to work.
Look at that.
Bam. That's confetti right there. We got some confetti. Oh, did my confetti not work anymore? What's going on? Oh, confetti.
We'll have to use n8n to fix it. Oh, there it is.
There you go. Okay, so we actually forgot. We got to check if it actually updated in Webflow. Let's go check into Webflow thing. Okay, yeah, it worked. Awesome. We've got that. It created the slug automatically. That's fantastic. So that was, like, the first step in. So we have 10 minutes here, Jason. We have a lot of questions. So I do want to spend, like, let's do a speed run to say, okay, let's say I want to update Airtable, with the output of this, right? So just quickly, I want to output. So we're going to go to Webflow, right? We're going to, no, Airtable. We're going to go to Airtable.
Oh, Airtable. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to go Airtable. Boom. I want to, boom.
Regular one. Yeah.
Same credentials. I want to update.
Yeah.
Same base ID. See? I know my way around n8n. And then record ID. Imagine, ID. I imagine ID of the record to update.
What you'll want to do is you want to pull that from the output of your
exactly nodes or current node. I guess there's
current
two.
node makes most sense. Yep.
I want to.
I default to current node if I can.
But see, this is the what we just ran in Webflow. I
Oh,
want the
sorry. Yes, yes,
Airtable
you
ID.
are
Yeah.
correct. So
Yeah.
you're right. You have to go use the node. Yep.
Yeah. There you go.
Output data.
Joel, great question. I'm going to get to it. So ID is what I want to
Yep.
pull in.
There you go.
Boom. So X out here. And then I don't want to update all fields. I want to update a specific field. Again, a very interesting decision from whoever built this node to update all fields, right? So I want to
Yes.
update. So this is interesting. So it's telling me which field do I want to update?
Yeah. So I would probably just type it in.
Right. You're totally right. So what's going on? Oh, it's because I got a reset value. Okay, here you go.
Yeah.
And the field I want to update is item ID.
Yeah.
And then I imagine it's case sensitive, so it's ID like that. And then how do I say that I want the item ID value to be from step 1?
It from the item ID value.
I want to update this item ID. So I want to update this record.
Yeah.
The field I want to update is item ID. And I
Yeah.
want
So that would come in from
Webflow.
Webflow. Yes.
So
And I think you have to go under options.
typecast, yes, I want typecast on. I think, let me check here. Let me check the settings. So I want to update one field.
Yeah.
And then I think what I would need to do is do like pass in the JSON. This is my, let's try this. So it's saying I will have.
So you want to pass in an object?
I think so because
I would check. I would look at the docs because
right,
I
you're
don't
totally
know
right.
this node terribly well, and the
Okay,
docs
update data.
probably they go update and list.
Update data in a table. All right, this is where we get some really geeky stuff. Let me get to update. Okay, example usage, append, list, update, Airtable 2, start node.
I think I saw it further down there. So there's append, there's list. Keep going. There
There's
it
no
is.
update. Okay.
Update. Because so while you're looking at that, I'll explain to the viewers. One of the challenges that you do have with multiple people, and sometimes these are community members, sometimes they're n8n developers doing things. They all do things sometimes a little bit different. And I know n8n is kind of working right now towards standardizing how all that works. And so sometimes things will work one way in one node and a different way in another.
So this one's update all fields.
Oh, so that's all they cheated on you.
Yeah, they kind of gave me let's give it a try, just running just
Absolutely.
that. And if we can, we'll
Actually, so that value you have in there right now will actually, it's just text. It's not, it
it's not
isn't
okay.
a variable. So you'd have to actually modify that.
Okay, let's go into here and then what's going on? Oh, it's because
so there's a little quirk that if you drag outside of the node, it closes it out.
Okay, I got to go into add expression. And then I'm saying I want the expression to be item ID. Let me just make sure I'm writing that right. No, it's item like this. We're passing in the object to the call.
Yeah.
Yes, let's just do that. And then
see what that does.
We can see whether that. Okay, let's run this.
Yeah. Just execute the node.
Let's go.
Oh, it did something.
It's something. It did not update the item ID. So there's a question from I don't remember if it was there was a question around how can we see logs, right? Is there a way for me to see like what did it just pass?
There is actually. Yeah. So if you close this, we can just very quickly and even close this node down. On the left-hand side, you got this whole menu of things, which we haven't even had time to dig into that. Executions is the one that you want, the second last one.
I'm going to save this one first.
Yeah.
Executions.
And of course, we aren't
I can just run it. I can just execute. I can make
You
it
can.
active.
So actually, we would have to make one change.
Uh-huh.
If you go to the menu again,
Yeah.
and it is, I never remember which one it isn't this one. So let's close this for a sec and go to the left hand side. And I think it is, keep going up, right there. Yeah, that menu. There's an option here that is settings. Thank you. Click on that one. And if we here
Ah,
have
I
save
see.
manual executions, yes, yes, save.
Okay.
So just hit execute workflow at the bottom. It'll actually execute the whole thing.
Okay. And then we go into
And then now you
execution.
can go to executions and you see it there. And so when you're running this as a service in behind the scenes,
Mm.
this is important because it will actually show you what all the data was all the way along. So, so when you open it up,
How do I open it though? Do I
on the right hand side, the
open?
little orange icon, and I'm pointing at my screen like you can see me point there. So this, you'll see at the top, it says that this is an execution when it
Huh?
executed. And this is, you see all the little check marks. This is all the data that got passed through this system, and you can see it.
Output. Got it. But how do I see? Can I see the exact? I can't see the exact API call that was like
The
run.
call itself, no.
Okay, got it.
So that gets really geeky. There's a whole log system in behind the scenes
Mm,
that does all of that stuff, and I do know there is some work around that because this is a low code tool. Typically, we don't like people don't dig into that.
right.
I, of course, that's the first place I go, so I
Yeah.
dig into all that kind of stuff.
Um.
But this is kind of neat because if you are running this as a service, you can always come in, see this information. If there's an error occurring, it'll
Mhm,
show an error,
right.
and you can actually go back and look at the errors and fix those.
So I want to do spend. So what we're gonna do after this is I'll I know Jason has a way of writing the workflow and then adding a URL so you can copy paste it with the update. So we'll get that fixed just because I do want to spend the last 5 minutes answering people's questions. So
Yeah,
we'll drop that in the description.
yeah.
So question from Joel, who said, you can add a step for running code. Is JavaScript the only language, or can you run Python between steps?
So because n8n is kind of it's Node.js based, and
Mm,
so that's where it has all of its hooks and its history. But there is a trick that you can do if you are running a self-hosted version. There is an execute node available,
mm,
and that execute node can run anything that you could run on the command line. So bash scripts, Python scripts, whatever you want.
mm.
So it's not available in here because you're on the cloud version.
Right.
But if you've got it on your own, you have that execute node, and away you go. You can do all kinds of stuff with that.
Got it. Okay. So other questions here. Um, so Robert, hopefully we answer your question like what are ways to debug. So go into execution. Pro tip from Jason: save your past ones. So that one was really good. Let's see what other questions. Oh, great question from S, which is what is the best way to store data? Is there a built-in database for
Mm,
logs or for data just passing through
yep.
n8n?
And that's actually a common question. And one of the things that n8n really focused on early is it's a data processor.
Mm,
It's not necessarily a data store. And so you'll see with a lot of these other tools, like Webflow, great example. It's got its own little database built in for it. So n8n almost consciously made a decision not to create a data store. And
mm,
so that was one of the first things that I struggled with is like, where do I store data for recall later and so on and so forth. And so what I had started out with initially, because I was doing my own, is I was actually saving it to flat files within the n8n environment itself. Not a great solution. So what I would recommend here is use something like Airtable.
mm.
And so you have your Airtable tables. You can go through and pull information from there, push, pull back and forth. And there's a bunch of other. I use Airtable because I know Aaron's partial to Airtable, but there are
I'm
there
a-
are
I
other.
I I'm partial to whatever works for you or for anyone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Um.
So if you take a look, actually, if you, Aaron, if you could open up the plus node over there,
Whoops.
and there's a whole storage area. in like data storage area, and it talks to like MySQL locally. You
Right.
can save it in a Google Sheet if you want, in
Mm,
Excel files, whatever works for you, whatever you're comfortable with.
yeah.
I've actually seen people who will save it as an Excel
Uh,
spreadsheet stored in OneDrive, and then n8n does all the updates, and then they just go into the spreadsheet and take a look at it, and they're seeing the changes in real time.
yeah. The world doesn't need another data storage place. There
No,
are clearly enough, and there's Airtable, MongoDB, NoCodeDB. It seems like there's a lot of options here. So,
yeah,
great question from Penny. So thanks S for that question. Penny asks, if you are self-hosting, what what is the update setup like? I know that's one of the. I'm sure Penny, you're a WordPress person or used to use WordPress, and updating versions is always a the stream pain in the ass to say the least. So
sure.
how would you how does that work on n8n?
Yeah. So if you're self-hosting on your own, I actually have a little three-line bash script that I use
Mm,
that it turns off n8n, does the update to n8n version, and then starts it up again. It's literally one command line, and away it goes. It's fairly straightforward. Now, as far as workflows go, like I don't know if you're referring to like kind of the workflows we saw at the beginning with the templates.
right.
Those actually get pulled in kind of more or less in real time.
Mm,
When you fire up your main screen, it'll reach out to, you can actually see all those templates on, I think it's n8n.io/workflows.
mm,
They're all listed out there, and you can even submit your own if you want to get the kick out of having your own workflow showing up in everybody's templates.
absolutely. Okay, well, I think I've that pretty much. I see a question from Josh. How does it compare to Make and Integromat? I think we talked about that
Mhm.
more. Is more geekiness, is inherent to
Yep.
A9N, maybe a little more self-learning. But I think the value of that is flexibility. And you can crowdsource, not crowdsource, maybe not the right word, but you can put in your own requests or have them done. Or if
Yep.
you're like, hey, I absolutely need this, you can take the code, add your own little module to it, and kind of go from there. So
Yeah. You can definitely leverage the community.
absolutely. So I guess Jason, as a final note here, where can folks learn more? Where would you point folks to yourself and to n8n to keep learning?
For n8n, it's just n8n.io.
Hmm.
That's kind of their main website. Everything can be bounced off from there. The community is community.n8n.io.
Hmm.
If you want to get into n8n Cloud, that's n8n.cloud, and you get the first month free.
Hmm.
So if you want to just give it a try without having to go through all the gyrations of self-hosting. And then, if you want to get a hold of me, your best bet is just to hit Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm at Teflon Dude on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, I will see you on Twitter. Jason, huge thanks for coming. For everyone join, I hope to see you next week. I think we're on our continue learning new tools. So today was n8n. I got a bunch of requests around Coda. So we're doing Coda next. In June, we already got one scheduled, Workflow for Accountants with Jason, another Jason. I've actually got, I think we're scheduled till July. I think the next available slot is July 15th. So there's a bunch of stream coming. So folks, I hope you enjoyed the stream. I will see you back next week. And Jason, huge thanks for you for coming and teaching us n8n. And I hope, I think I'm gonna mess around with it. I think this is one of the tool it's just geeky enough for me. So I'm really excited to keep playing around
Yeah,
with it.
excellent. That's all we can ask.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone. Have a
You
great
bet. Thank
day.
you.
Bye, Penny. Bye, Robert. Thanks for coming. So many folks. We had Joel in here. Josh, thanks so much. I will see you all back next week. And wishing you all a great week. Bye, everyone.